Hello everyone and welcome to Archaeoviking. Today is the second video in my series on the Lost Cause myth and the Civil War in Georgia. This video specifically is going to focus on the Lost Cause myth and the Civil War in the North Georgia mountains. And the reason I say the North Georgia mountains is because uh, the North Georgia, the northern part of Georgia, is made up of part of the Appalachian Mountains and is a very mountainous region, with multiple different counties being located within the Appalachian Mountains in North Georgia. But for the purposes of today's video, we're going to focus on just two counties, counties that I grew up in and around. And these counties are Bartow County and Floyd County. But before we get into that, first we need to go into a content warning, because disturbing content will be discussed in this video. Specifically, racist phrases and words will be occasionally used when reading primary source documents. The language used in these documents does not reflect the views or beliefs of myself, the person making the video, and will only be used for educational purposes. But regardless, they will be used, and they are incredibly uh, harmful and wrong words to use. So I do apologize for using them, um, even for educational purposes. But sometimes it does have to be done. All right. Next, we need to go over um, sort of what is the lost cause myth. Now, I already went over this in my previous video. However, I think for each of these videos, it's going to be important to sort of go over it each time. So, the lost cause is a romanticized and largely inaccurate interpretation of the American Civil War developed by white Southerners after the conflict that downplays the role of African chattel slavery and portrays the Confederacy as fighting for states' rights and a noble cause. The Lost Cause myth includes core ideas such as the Civil War was primarily about states' rights, not African chattel slavery, that the Confederacy was fighting for a just cause and its leaders were heroic figures, that African chattel slavery was a benign institution and enslaved people were happy and content, as well as that the Union victory was due to superior resources and numbers and not military prowess. Now, this is not a completely untrue statement, as the North did in fact have um, more resources and more soldiers that they could put into their army. But that doesn't change the fact that they also defeated the Confederacy using superior tactics, as well as superior technology. And then lastly, the Lost Cause has had a lasting impact on Southern culture and American popular memory, influencing how the Civil War in the South are remembered and commemorated. And here are some good starting off sources that I got this information from, and that you can learn more about the Lost Cause myth from. These are by no means comprehensive, but they are at least a good places to start. All right, now we need to take a look at Floyd County and Bartow County, Georgia, in the antebellum South. Real quick, you will see throughout the video that I have Bartow County also being called Cass County, and that's because Bartow County was originally known as Cass County before eventually being renamed to Bartow County. So they are the same county. So just keep that in mind. I will be referring to it as Bartow County, but I will have this up here just as a reminder that during this point in time, it was also called Cass County. So, during the antebellum South, uh, in Bartow County and Floyd County, cotton was the primary cash crop, which was the case for all southern states. And during the antebellum South, Floyd County and Bartow County, Georgia, were able to grow large amounts of cotton thanks to their locations on the fertile Etowah and Oostenaula river valleys, which you can see here on this map. And here is the Etowah River here. And because of this, the city of Rome in Floyd County and the city of Cartersville in Bartow County would become wealthy trading cities by using the Oostenaula and Etowah rivers to export large amounts of cotton. And here's in fact uh, uh, a scene where people were bringing cotton in to be exported. And here's a steamboat that would have been used to both import and export goods, including cotton, to Rome, Georgia, in Floyd County, and to Cartersville, Georgia, in Bartow County. Uh, and of course, the cotton industries of Floyd County and Bartow County relied heavily on African chattel slavery, which was most certainly a brutal institution with barbarous punishments being used against enslaved African Americans for any minor infraction, and with these punishments including the most commonly known whipping, also known as lashing, but also tying people to a stick and beating them brutally with a paddle, sometimes with, say, spikes or bumps in it, other times with holes in it. And as you can see here in this picture here, the lashing specifically could leave brutal lifelong scars. It was by no means a benign punishment in any way. And then white American enslavers would also um, take this a step further and would force other enslaved African Americans to do the whipping or lashing for them as a sort of way to one demoralize them and the other enslaved African Americans under their control by showing what power he held over them and by making them, of course, understandably feel guilty for having to do said lashing to uh, their fellow enslaved African Americans, but also it was a form of control to sort of show, like, I control what you can do and can't do. And then even just as horrible of a practice within African chattel slavery was the selling apart of entire families, for example, mothers and children from each other, and husbands and wives, and of course, parents from children. They would all be sold apart at it, or could be all sold apart at any given time by white American enslavers. All right, now this brings us to our next section, the road to the Civil War. Uh, and during this period of time, the issue of whether African chattel slavery should be allowed to expand to newly acquired territories, such as New Mexico and Kansas, would lead to growing tensions between the North and the South, which I discussed in more depth in my previous video that I will link in the iCard. Uh, and this happened between 1848 and 1860 CE. And this tensions over the spread of African chattel slavery to the newly acquired territories would lead Southern citizens and politicians to view Northern attempts to halt the spread of African chattel slavery as an infringement on their rights, which can be seen in this excerpt from a speech given by Charles W. Howard at Cherokee Baptist College in Bartow County, Georgia, on July of 1860 CE. And real quick side note, Cherokee Baptist College no longer exists. There is a plaque, though, in Bartow County commemorating it, so there is that. But anyways, the excerpt reads, and I quote, "We all deeply deplore the moral evils which are connected with our slave system. But are these evils less in any other country? Compare the North and the South as to purity of public sentiment, soundness of public morals, and sacred observances of faith. The Negro is one whom, while we would not be so cruel as to make him free, because God and nature have not designed him for freedom, we feed, clothe, protect, and defend him as we defend our hearthstones, our wives, and children. Nor is it confession of unworthy weakness to acknowledge that our social organization is dependent upon the inferior African. Our conservative strength is based upon the connection of our slave system with our whole internal political economy." So as you can see here, as said within the speech given by Charles W. Howard, um, the citizens of the South, and in this case of Bartow County, Georgia, uh, very much viewed African chattel slavery uh, and the use of African chattel slavery as their right. that any kind of infringement on it was infringing on uh, how nature and God intended uh, the world to be built. And here are the sources that I got that information from. And then later, Southern citizens and politicians would go on to view the election of Abraham Lincoln as the president of the United States as yet another attack on the institution of African chattel slavery. And we can see this in an excerpt from of a resolution from Floyd County presented by Floyd County politician Mr. Alexander, um, and also from Cass County politician Mr. Hardin. Um, a resolution that was adopted by everyone, all the constituents at the meeting. And it reads, and I quote, where is the abolition sentiment of the northern states, first openly manifested in 1820, has for the last 40 years steadily and rapidly increased in volume, in intensity of hostility to the form of society existing in the southern states and to the rights of the states as equal, independent, and sovereign nations of members of the Union, has led to long continued and ever increasing abuse and hatred of the Southern people, to ceaseless war upon the plainest constitutional rights, to an open and shameless nullification of that provision of the Constitution intended to secure the rendition of fugitive slaves, and of the laws of Congress to give it effect, has led many of our people who sought to avail themselves of their rights under these provisions of the laws and the Constitution to encounter fines, imprisonment, and death, has prompted the armed invasion of southern soil by stealth amidst the sacred repose of a Sabbath night, for the diabolical purpose of inaugurating a ruthless war of the blacks against the whites throughout the southern states, has prompted large masses of northern people openly to sympathize with the treacherous and traitorous invaders of our country, and elevate the leaders of a band of midnight assassins, robbers, and himself an assassin and a robber to the rank of hero and martyr, has sent forth far and wide over our section of the Union its vile emissaries to instigate the slaves to destroy our property, burn our towns, devastate our country, and spread distrust, dismay, and death by poison among our people, has disrupted the churches and destroyed all national parties, has now fully organized a party conjoined to a hostile section and composed even there of those only who have encouraged, sympathized with, instigated, or perpetrated this long series of insults, outrage, and wrongs for the avowed purpose of making a common government armed by us with power only for our protection, an instrument in the hands of our enemies for our destruction. So as you can see in this resolution that was again adopted by everyone who went to Floyd County to this political meeting in Floyd County, the election of Abraham Lincoln and the uh, attempts by Northern abolitionists to end African chattel slavery, and even though they don't say his name outright, the attempts by John Brown to incite rebellions of enslaved African Americans were all viewed as just the continuation of previous attacks on the South's right to have the institution of African chattel slavery. Now this brings us to the American Civil War, whereupon Georgia would secede from the United States and join the newly created Confederate States of America, also known as the Confederacy, on January 19th, 1861 CE. And then on April 12th and April 13th, 1861 CE, the Confederacy would attack the United States Fort Sumter and officially begin the American Civil War. During the Civil War, citizens of Floyd County and Bartow County, Georgia, would openly state their wish to kill runaway enslaved African Americans to end the war, and would also openly state their fears of enslaved African Americans rebelling against the Confederacy. In regards to the wish to kill runaway enslaved African Americans, we can see an example of this in an excerpt from a letter sent by Mary Carter to Georgia Colonel George Carter sometime in 1862 CE. That reads, and I quote, I wish you could send me a repeater to kill Tories and niggers with, I think they was killed, this war would stop. So again, apologies for using the derogatory language and racist language. Um, and two, as you can see in this letter, uh, Mary Carter very much, again, a citizen of Bartow County, Georgia, very much believed that killing runaway enslaved African Americans would be a way to end the war, as well as killing Unionists, which were people who supported the Union in the South, who were also called Tories. And then, in terms of the fears of enslaved African Americans rebelling against the Confederacy, we can see an example of this in a letter sent from uh, Georgia Colonel George Carter himself to C.W. Carter on February 11th, 1862 CE, that reads, and I quote, up in Tennessee, 5 Negroes killed a family of white folks, and they burned 4 of them and cut the other up into mincemeat. They would be able to wade through white men's blood to their knees for their freedom. Now, for one thing, as you can see in this excerpt, George Carter is making a claim that this rebellion of enslaved African Americans against white American Southerners has already started. And sure, that may be to some degree true, but usually accounts of the brutality discussed like this uh, that George Carter discusses were oftentimes exaggerated or outright made up by white American Southerners. Um, but even then, it's also not completely out of the realm of possibility. But regardless of whether it was made up or something happened or exaggerated, this was very clearly a fear that George Carter and quite probably, the individual he was sending the letter to, C.W. Carter, had. Because again, George Carter stated that he believed that enslaved African Americans would, quote, wade through white men's blood to their knees for their freedom. So he's like, they will fight and kill, air quotes, uh, white Southern Americans for their freedom. Now, there is one important thing to point out is that while most citizens of Floyd County and Bartow County supported African chattel slavery and the Confederacy, most citizens who lived in the Appalachian Mountains of both counties, Bartow County and Floyd County, because while most of the population lived in the fertile river valleys, um, there was a large amount of the population that lived in the mountainous regions of the counties. Uh, and these individuals who lived in the Appalachian Mountains of both these counties would largely oppose both the Confederacy and African chattel slavery, as one, they did not rely on African chattel slavery due to the limited land fit for large scale agriculture, as well as their opposition to seceding from the United States, because most inhabitants of the Appalachian Mountains actually did not want to secede from the United States. However, their populations were much smaller than the rest of the states, like say Georgia or Western Tennessee, etc., that did want, excuse me, want to secede. And so, because of this, this would lead many Appalachian citizens to be dubbed Unionists and would be ostracized. Who would then be ostracized by the Confederacy, with many Appalachian Unionists eventually joining the United States Army. Now, the this subject requires a video of its own. In fact, the next video will discuss the subject and discuss the broader subject of anti-Confederate movements within Georgia. But I would be remiss not to mention this. Uh, and here's an example of a secret meeting of Southern Unionists, again, people who supported the Union and were against the Confederacy within Southern states like Georgia. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because many Georgia newspapers would go on to praise the execution of both Georgia Unionists and runaway enslaved African Americans. With a specific example being the Georgia Journal and Messenger from Macon, Georgia, specifically the issue published on July 20th, 1864 CE, whereupon they have a specific section on news from Rome, where you can see here in this paragraph, they state that there is guerrilla warfare that's been going on with fierce fatality so far as African Americans are concerned, both enslaved and free African Americans. And that the highways were decorated with black mortality lying here and there. Uh, essentially a large number of enslaved and free African Americans were killed and lying along the highways where they were being decaying uh, and being fed on by worms, with many of these individuals being called deluded beings who were killed just simply for the act of escaping from their enslavers, specifically in northeastern Alabama. And the newspaper goes on to say that the atmosphere was tainted with the odor of their decaying corpses, and that all this was justly chargeable before high heaven to be the murderous philanthropy of the Yankee nation, which is not the case at all. They're saying it was the Yankee nation. However, they're also stating that they were executed because they were running away from their enslavers. Yeah, you can sort of guess what who was the actual culprit there. Now this brings us to our concluding thoughts. Okay, so why is the lost cause a myth? Well, for one, African chattel slavery was integral to the economies of southern cities and counties, as seen with Floyd County, Georgia, and Bartow County, Georgia. Two, Southern citizens such as Charles W. Howard in Bartow County and Mark A. Hardin in Floyd County expressed the importance of African chattel slavery to the economy and culture of the South, and their intent to defend the institution of African chattel slavery from Northern abolitionists. And also, they expressed their anger at individuals such as Abraham Lincoln opposing African chattel slavery. During the Civil War, three during the Civil War, citizens of Floyd County and Bartow County expressed their intent of killing runaway enslaved African Americans to end the war, and expressed the fears of possible rebellions by enslaved African Americans. Four, during the Civil War, citizens of Floyd County and Bartow County also celebrated the executions of individuals who supported the United States and runaway enslaved African Americans. Taken together, these facts show that the lost cause is nothing more than a myth. All right, with that, that ends our second video on the lost cause myth and the Civil War in Georgia. Uh, as I said in the previous video, I hope that I'll be watching learned a lot from this video. I know it's a very heavy subject to talk about, and I know it's a very contentious subject, unfortunately. Again, as I said in the previous video, I sympathize to a certain degree with people who believe in the lost cause because it is something that has been so ingrained in the education of much of the South that it's hard to escape. Again, I myself uh, believed that, growing up in the South and going in North Georgia and going through school, I learned basically nothing but the lost cause myth. And it took going to college and having a historian actually show me the primary documents and all of the other reasons why the Civil War was fought over slavery to sort of get me to realize that that was indeed the case, that the lost cause was a myth. So I do feel some sympathy there, but it's the thing is the lost cause is just not true, and I'm sorry. It's a myth, nothing more, nothing less. And so with that, I'm going to end the video. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to see me cover any of the subjects I mentioned in this video in greater detail in later videos, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. And I hope you all have a good day.